What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian.
And we're here with a very special guest. We're here with Dakotah Lilly, or as he's known on Twitter, Gringo Chavista1. He's the co-founder of Students and Youth for a New America. His work has been featured on even from Tucker Carlson, Telesur, Mint Press News, and the Orinoco Tribune. And he's traveled to Venezuela 4 different times in the past few years and has worked closely with local groups like the PSUV, GPPSB, La Campora, and PT. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite.
So for starters, your Twitter is a new Twitter. You've been censored on Twitter like many other Latin American and anti-imperialist voices. I mean, the most recent are Ali Vargas and Mint Press News. What happened?
I wish I knew. I didn't keep asking me what was the offending tweet but I have no idea. I didn't receive an email. I didn't get anything. I just woke up one day and it was gone. And it was the same day as they said there was a big mistaken outage. A bunch of people got suspended, a bunch of people got taken down. But then they said that all those people had been reinstated, which I have not been. So I don't think I was part of that. I think I was just taken down. So yeah, I really don't know. And like you said, there's been a lot. I used to work for Mint Press News, so I doubt it's related because I believe Ollie works with Mint Press now too as well. So I think they were censored because they were connected with Ollie, but people all the time get temporarily suspended, hidden, Venezuela analysis, and even the current vice president of Venezuela, Cristina. Her son has been suspended from Twitter with no explanation. A couple of the people that I know in Venezuela have been suspended with no explanation. So it's part of a pattern, but I couldn't tell you why, honestly.
I mean, it seems utterly bizarre given that I tweet credible death threats at Chasten Buttigieg on the daily basis, and I'm still on Twitter somehow. So,
And that's the thing. I've always seen people have I've seen people with 40,000, 50,000 followers get their accounts taken down. So I was always really walking on eggshells about that because I've had it for years and I've gotten to 2,000, which is a big deal for me. Yeah. And I never wanted to see it taken down, but even I didn't do anything wrong and it gets taken down. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. So that's fun. Years and years.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it's easy to engage in a sort of maybe a lazy conspiratorial thinking, but these patterns, it doesn't seem like these. Put it this way, there's plenty of people who use Twitter in ways that the tech overlords do not bless, who stay around, and yet it does certainly seem to cluster that if you're part of a certain kind of internationalist left circle, then your account is always sort of in danger.
Yeah, and I mean no one is really safe because even the vice president of Venezuela, her account got suspended too. That's the contrary to popular belief, the democratically elected vice president of Venezuela has her Twitter account taken down. It just makes zero sense, and it's part of, I don't know. It's just. Sorry, that's my dog. For people who don't see, we're
getting a dog and pony show. It's great.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to me that even people who are semi heads of state get taken down. And it was interesting to me because the vice president, her account was taken down right when COVID started arriving in Venezuela, and she's head of the task force for dealing with COVID. So, I mean, it again, like you said, it's easy to engage with this kind of conspiratorial thinking, but it doesn't seem to be happening to Bolsonaro in Brazil or any of his ministers or any of his, fascist ilk. But accounts associated with Argentina, Bolivia, Mexico, and Venezuela get targeted all the time.
Yeah, and it seems to be actually accelerating, at least from my perspective. I've noticed more and more links of accounts that write up publications on anti-imperialist rhetoric have been banned in the DMs. I mean, President Trump's tweets are just constantly censored now by Twitter. And I just keep seeing more accounts deleted and there's no reason explained.
And I guess I just want to know, like, I mean, they say they have things like in place to prevent that. They have an appeals process and stuff like that. But I've submitted like probably at this point like 10 appeals without ever receiving a response to any of them. Which maybe they stopped maybe they never answered because I was just fucking annoying. But, I don't know, am I allowed to curse?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's encouraged, actually, required. Some would say.
Okay, cool. Well, I meant the requirement. That's good. But yes, maybe it's just because I was annoying, but I never heard anything from Twitter. Literally nothing. And it sucks because there's people who I know on Twitter, and that was the way I communicated with them, and they're protected or they're locked or something like that. So it's not as easy for me to be able to interact with them again. So it blows, but hopefully, maybe, I mean, I was taken down around when the United Nations was meeting, so I thought maybe it was connected to that, but there's also elections in Venezuela less than a month away, so maybe it's connected to that. I really don't know.
It's almost as if maybe letting a multi-billion-dollar sort of private corporation moderate all of our human interactions might be a bad thing. I don't know, just a wild thought I had.
It might be, but I mean, I guess it's up to smarter people to decide.
Changing topics slightly. So you're well aware of the election results. It seems like Biden has won, but I'm really curious. What was the Obama-Biden administration's treatment of like Latin America, and like what kind of like signifiers will it give to the potential for the next 4 years in the region? I mean, this is the same group funded by all of these Silicon Valley corporations as well. So, yeah.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I think there was, if we were voting purely on the basis of a change in policy to Venezuela and Cuba, I think Trump might have been better, honestly, because he's not running for re-election. Therefore, he doesn't hear all those voters in Florida, which is a huge, deal for them. And there's been people like, I believe it was John Bolton's book said that he planned on meeting with Maduro should he be reelected, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that's true, but it's telling. And again, when it comes to the Obama administration, I mean, it was just as abysmal as any other administration. You saw the parliamentary coup against Dilma Rousseff in Brazil. You saw the imprisonment of Lula, which we all know, and it's very well documented that the State Department cooperated with prosecutors who then went on to work in the Bolsonaro administration. So that was obviously connected, and that was a huge coup in one of the largest economies in the world. You saw the 2011 declaration of Venezuela as an extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States, which Obama and Biden did. You saw the complete so in Argentina, when Argentina was fighting with vulture funds, the Obama administration did nothing and let the United States courts kind of try to blackmail Argentina. And that kind of changed once Mauricio Macri, the center-right president, got in. You saw the kind of lawfare, what they call it in Latin America, the jailing of dissidents, like leftist dissidents, like Lula, like Dilma Rousseff, like Cristina Fernandez, like Rafael Correa, and so it's really it'll be no different. I don't believe anyway. Maybe perhaps there'll be a little bit of a thawing again with Cuba, because that was one of the things that Obama did. That was one of the few things that Obama did that didn't violate every single international agreement that we've ever agreed to. So it's hard to say, but I think if we have anything to hope for, it would be Cuba. But other than that, I don't see much hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a bit of a grim situation when we find ourselves picking between the sort of Trump appointees who, count among their number literal Iran-Contra criminals. And then, at least as that sort of Clintonite strain was Hillary Clinton, proudly talking about her association with Henry Kissinger, a man who, was under indictment and probably would be in jail if not for September 11th. But yeah, what a world to wake up to.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you see them all kind of like, I mean, Henry Kissinger obviously was instrumental in the coup against Allende in Chile, the bombings in Cambodia, and this is someone that, I mean, Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright, the Clintons, I mean, they're all, again, like, they're all part of that kind of old world, like foreign policy establishment that I don't think Trump is in. Because, I mean, to his credit, there hasn't been a new war started, which is a fabulous achievement for a U.S.
True, yeah.
How long has it been since that has happened? Not to say he's not a war criminal. I truly believe, if he was tried in a independent court, he would be beheaded. But maybe I shouldn't say that. He would get a very fair punishment.
Do you want us to cut that?
Nah, keep it in.
Okay.
I mean, I've been to Venezuela, I've been to Colombia, I've been to Russia. Like, there's a file on me somewhere. I'm completely fine with that.
You're on a list.
Really, I mean, whatever. Those pictures with the vice president are probably what really did it. But
so there seems to be a second pink tide going for Latin America, and clearly Trump has not been successful in curtailing it. I mean, the one successful regime change he did was Bolivia, and it failed within like a year, as well as like the current constitutional vote in Chile. You have the center left leader in Argentina and possibly Ecuador in, I think, February. Do you think the Biden administration is going to allow this to keep going forward, or do you think it's going to smash it through soft power?
I think they'll try to. Honestly, I think the conservative wave, what came after the first pink tide, I think really helped us because it sucked for everyone. Like, if you look at the conditions in Ecuador, if you look at the conditions in Brazil, Argentina under Macri, you saw all these countries where you saw a conservative restoration. Things were terrible. Like, public services were deteriorating, unemployment was up, debt was up, subordination to the IMF, subordination to the United States, crushing of opposition. The very same things that a lot of the time they accused the left of doing, they actually did engage in, and they did it, absolutely terribly. So I think the hope is that people are much more militant now because they see that Bolivia was a coup. A lot of people do believe that Brazil was a coup, that in Argentina there's lawfare, in Ecuador there's lawfare. So I think people are a little bit more aware now. Sometimes, it's hard to keep momentum going when you don't have like a full on, like Cuba, for example. Obviously it's easier because they have like a full on like communist party, like in power. It's different when you're still trying within the confines of liberal democracy, trying to change the liberal democratic system at the same time as change everything else. So I think the Biden administration, God only knows who's going to be in it. But I think they'll try to, but I think the people will be much more resilient to it now because they've seen what happens when those people come to power. Not to say that, it's impossible, but I think people are more militant now in their opposition to things like that in Latin America.
I think my concern with the Biden administration is just sort of thinking about the history of U.S. meddling in or it's like U.S. soft power in Latin America has usually sort of revolved around the use of particularly debt and like monetary policy and financial blockades, right? This has been like the cornerstone and all in the interest of protecting U.S. foreign investment, right? And so thinking of Biden as the banker's president, I mean, he's their guy in Washington, always has been. I'm a little worried just about like the degree to which they'll be able to extract power that is not quite so soft, actually. I mean,
I'm definitely worried. I just have, they already did that 100% in Argentina when Mauricio Macri got in and took the IMF's largest loan in the history of the IMF, almost $60 billion. That was almost like a death stamp, and now you have the new administration, which can't really move much because they have to pay all this interest on this debt. And $60 billion, which is a huge amount of money, which they owe in a currency that they cannot print. They, obviously the pandemic is making it a million times worse. And I mean, you see even like Venezuela made a very smart move when the pandemic hit, and they said, they called the IMF in the United States' bluff. They said, fine, let the IMF give us money to help fight the COVID. And the IMF said, no, we're not going to do that, proving just how ideological the IMF is. Not that we have any doubt, but a lot of people still seem to believe that, it's just this international Peace Corps, but financially. I think the sanctions and everything against Venezuela will continue. I don't think there's any really going back from them, at least under a Biden administration. Maybe there'll be like softenings, but not really. And even like it's a full on blockade against a country, which has caused the deaths of like tens of thousands of people. So I think that the soft power methods of, liberals is more dangerous in a way, because it's harder for people to see it and it can be more enduring. Like it's easier to fight back in Venezuela, if there was like a military option, there's millions of armed militias who support the Bolivarian Revolution that you're not going to be able to just roll a tank over. But when it comes to like financial subordination, it's not something that you can really fight back against. As long if you're an ordinary citizen, if you're a government that actually has, you want to fight back against that, you can, but it's difficult when you're just a run-of-the-mill person.
So you have traveled to Venezuela, as we alluded to, several times, and have sort of made public statements on your views on Venezuela going back a while. So let me see if I can just channel a notable appearance here. Socialism, wherever it's tried, hasn't worked. And why would you be into this? Why would you be into this as an American? Like, you're a young guy, you're a smart guy. Why would you be into this?
Both of them to assume I'm smart.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, very kind. Sorry, for context, Dakotah appeared on the Tucker Carlson show back in about 2017, right?
Yeah, I was like 19, I think.
Yeah.
17.
And I mean, it kind of it's a wonderful clip, only because Tucker is pulling his usual like kind of like strange like tilted head puppy staring in a mirror look. And
constantly, whenever he's interviewing someone, he looks as if he's watching someone take a shit in his cereal.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. It's like he's smelling something rather rotten, but trying to keep going at the dinner table. But you kept your composure very well, and I mean, kind of come across incredibly well. I think that's why that clip has sort of endured as like, who is this person who just kind of withered the withering, the brutal intellectual attacks of Titan intellect Tucker Carlson.
It is nice seeing like the titles of like the typical like conservative things where it's like, oh, Charlie Kirk fucking annihilate liberal, like just murders,
yeah, tears apart atom by atom and shits on liberal.
Third-degree homicides. Annoying liberal. Like there's things where it's like, I think Real Clear Politics did something where it was like Steven Crowder did like an article where it was like, and they all call me a liberal, and I'm not a liberal.
Yeah, let's not say things we can't take back.
Like, I don't get it. Like, what made them, like, I know what made them think I'm a liberal, but the just dumb people. I mean, honestly, like, I got a lot of hate from within the United States for that, but I got a lot of love from Latin America, which I think is very, I mean, it's kind of to be expected. But like, there were times when I was walking, because I used to go to school in New York City, just walking down the street in New York City, and like people would recognize me and like accost me and videotape me, and like it would get like hundreds of thousands of views. And I'm like, it's just so strange to me. Like, if I was doing the same thing for Saudi Arabia, like our politicians do, I don't like, why is it that like a Saudi citizen or a Saudi immigrant or anything like that has never done. It's just confusing to me. It's always like these rich upper class Venezuelans and Cubans, the Gusanos, the Esqualidos, you know, these type of people. Like the guy who videotaped me on that occasion, and that one kind of went viral. I found his Instagram, and like $500 bottles of perfume, and he's like, you know, our people are starving, and I'm like, well, bitch, fucking send him some money. Like Patron on the rocks which costs like fucking $300 a bottle. I don't get it.
Well, wait, so this is just the 10 hours of walking through New York City viral video, but like socialist defender of dangerous socialist dictators edition.
Much. I mean, to be honest, I mean, and then there's time at my school. So I went to like this I went for political science, but it's known for like its art section. So a bunch of really annoying, stupid art people. And this girl comes up to me and she's dressed head to toe in an outfit, which I guarantee could have paid my rent for that year. She walks up to me and she's like, you know, have you ever been to Venezuela? Like, you know, also she's whiter than me. She's like, you know, I'm from Venezuela. It's terrible. Like, and I was like, tell me what you hated about the Chavez administration. Tell me what really irked you. And she was like, well, my family owns, you know, a couple hundred acres, and it was expropriated to build affordable housing. And I was like, okay, so you're really lucky that you were dealing with Chavez and not me, because never mind.
No, all credible death threats must be against Chasten Buttigieg.
Yeah.
It was always fascinating, right? These sob stories of, you know, first or second generation immigrants from around the world, of any perhaps actually existing socialist state or any country that hasn't quite got on board with capitalist hegemony. Suddenly the sentence always does start with, well, you know, when my grandfather ran the egg monopoly in all of China.
God, like, why is it like I appreciate that they're honest, because, but I more than anything, the fact that they don't make that connection. Like, you have to be a special kind of stupid to be like, these people will feel bad for me. Like, my jewels were melted down so that people could have houses. Like, you really expect people to just whatever.
Well, this is liberalism as the justifying ideology of capitalism, right? So it is precisely trying to weaponize a tool whereby if you were a liberal, I could look you dead in the eye and just sort of pout and say, you know, it was really hard for me growing up. My parents' second, third, and fourth mansions and super yachts got taken away. And you would go, oh, fuck. Oh my God, I've done it. I'm the bad guy here. It's like you are staring your class enemy dead in the face. Where these confrontations are rarely so stark, and yet I think they do tend to happen more around sort of expatriate communities or immigrant communities in the US, which is literally the failed children of the capitalist classes of, you know, other countries.
Well, it's interesting to me because it's very uniquely Latin American, in my opinion. Like, if you go to Chinatown in New York City, you always see the PRC flag. You always see the People's Republic of China flag. Sometimes you see pictures of Mao. If you ask a lot of people if you go to Brighton Beach, you know, where it's a ton of Russians, like, they're more honest. I honestly, like, it's easier for them to be like, yes, there were things that were good, because there were things that were bad. Like, in every single country, there's things that are bad. But it's just, it's interesting to me because it does feel almost uniquely Latin American. Because then there was a girl in my one class from Argentina, and it was like, oh my God, you have like the best president ever. You're so lucky. And she's like, nah, she's a fucking witch. I hate her. And I was like, okay, I'll buy.
Well, I mean, I do think it probably plays into, clearly because the US has a sort of horrendous record on just its treatment of like Latin American immigrants in general, most of whom are going to be proletarian, right? It dovetails so nicely. There's a pre-constructed narrative there of, one can talk about, your oppression at the hands of the terrible dictator in the same breath as being like, what, poor me? Which is not to say there's not real and structural issues with, the treatment of immigrants in this country. But I think that's perhaps why you've noticed that effect. China still has an existing bourgeois class as well, right? You can exist.
Yeah, I think it's also very, it's kind of the way they use like identity politics to kind of, because when I went on Tucker Carlson and my school had like a Facebook group for like freshmen, and it got posted in there, and people were like, how dare you talk over Venezuelans at the school? How dare you like take a seat, stay in your lane, blah, blah, blah. And it's like trying to explain to them the class connotations. They didn't understand. I was like, I'm speaking like to try to represent the people in Venezuela who clearly do not have a voice in the mainstream media here. You guys always get the spotlight, okay? The Esqualitos in the United States always get the spotlight. Like, why can't you let the poor, darker skinned ones in Venezuela actually get any sort of say? And again, I would love if they would have on a Venezuelan from Venezuela, one that's currently living there. But if you're not going to, like, and then you're going to attack me for saying the truth, which is the truth of millions of people who still live in Venezuela, it just seems a little ridiculous. But it's also part of the liberalism. How many immigrants are there in the United States from the Dominican Republic, from Honduras, from Haiti, from Puerto Rico, and yet no one's giving them a spotlight to be like, how bad was capitalism in Honduras? When it's one of the worst countries in the world to live in currently for the working class there.
Yeah, I wanted to get into like your travels into Venezuela. So like the narrative in the US is there's massive gun crime. If you like go as a visitor, you'll get shot. Like there's starving people everywhere. It's just horrible, and everyone.
Tucker was very concerned about the lack of toilet paper. A thing we've never experienced in the US. Of course,
COVID. But what was your experience like? And you've been 4 times. Like, how did the narrative match with like what you were seeing and what you were experiencing in actual Venezuela?
Well, it didn't at all. And again, like this isn't like I was not like sheltered around or anything. Like I took the Caracas Metro. I had my phone out. I was taking pictures. I witnessed the crowds. I went to squares and all that stuff. So I actually did see the city in a way that Tucker never has, or any of these people have ever had. Even like the people who are like in the human rights organizations, all of their accounts come from people outside of Venezuela. I didn't notice any shortages at all. I passed bakeries. I passed, this, that, and the other. There is a problem with inflation. Everyone will say that 100%. But to say the products aren't there, maybe in the past that was true, and we can debate about what the reason was. I don't think it has anything to do really with the policy of the government. But
it's to do with their policy insofar as they wouldn't just do whatever the US said.
Yeah, exactly. But, and again, I saw the processing plants for the CLAPs, the committees, like the local production and allocation committees for food. I saw expos of farmers and commune leaders and, campesinos and just all this different stuff. So the narrative was completely different. So the crime, like the crime there is not any worse than any large city in in Latin America, especially like when you look at like Bogota or Honduras or any of these others. So
the people absolutely hate living there, right? They're all just desperately trying to flee. They live in constant fear of repression, right?
No. See, I'm going with an open mind because yes, I have my ideas, but I would love, I'm there to learn, and I ask people, do you think the security forces are too repressive? Do you think like this, that, or the other, and no, they don't. I've heard some people say that they've had like a bad interaction, but I've never heard them be like, the state policy is, or I was like, my stuff was stolen and people were murdered. Like nothing like that. I mean, And not only that, but people always ignore the amount of security officers and cops that are actually tried in Venezuela for violating people's human rights, which numbers in the hundreds. Which again, perhaps it's a large number, but one, they're facing trial, which is something that can't be said of the United States.
Yeah, what is that like? I can't imagine. Huh.
And two, I mean, this revolution has been there for 20 years. That's in a history of a country which for hundreds of years has been a semi-colony, has had repression, has had murders, state-sanctioned murder, dictators, all this stuff. It's not an overnight thing where you can get rid of ideas of oppression and ideas of state security that just completely vanished. It's not like that. And I don't think really many places have had an experience like that. But are people finally working with the security? Absolutely. And are people learning human rights training? And are people indicted for violating people's human rights? All that. Yeah, everything, all the indicators are going in the right direction is my point, I guess. And I mean, when it comes to like I always hear the migration thing come up. It doesn't make any sense. If a country lost 3 million people in the span of a year, like the place would collapse, the place would fall apart. Some of the ways, and a website called Misión Verdad did an English report about the strange case of migration in Venezuela. Almost all the people, because some people have left, which happens when you're in a country that's being attacked by the world's most powerful empire in the world history, is that almost all the people that have gone have been college educated. Almost all the people that have gone have had a certain position of class privilege. And they also don't talk about the tens of thousands of people who have come back to Venezuela through a state-sponsored program called Vuelva a la Patria, which means return to the homeland. So the United States government will pay for flights, will send flights to other parts of Latin America all around the world in order to get people back to Venezuela who like no other country in the world has a program like that. And that's tens of thousands of people. So also like there's 5 million Colombians currently living in Venezuela. You know, that's the largest displacement of people in the entire world, larger than Syria. No one talks about that. In fact, Colombia is the number one. It's the Israel of Latin America, what I call it.
Well, I think so. I'm from New Zealand originally, and I sort of just think about like the number of New Zealanders living outside of New Zealand is just absolutely enormous, and New Zealand would be held up as a shining example of a liberal Western democracy, et cetera, and yet it turns out, like if economic prospects are limited for particularly those who have kind of clawed their way into the middle and upper middle class or become college educated, yes, they do tend to seek other opportunities. I mean, it's not really an indictment of a system as much as it's a symptom of the fact that across borders exist certain different labor markets. Like, yeah, no fucking shit.
Migration exists. Yeah. And if you look at the CIA World Factbook, actually, migration rate to Venezuela has been positive, meaning more people are coming to Venezuela than leaving. And that's certifiable. Look it up, y'all.
So another thing the media loves to ignore is the social programs of Venezuela, which obviously are meant to help lift the poor. What kind of programs is Venezuela doing? Like, what are they doing to help elevate the working class? And like, what did you get to witness in your travels?
Well, so, I mean, they really have a program for everything in Venezuela. They have the Misiones, which are the type of social program that was started by Hugo Chavez, which was a way to kind of bypass bureaucracy. It's very community organized. And so they have things like job training programs. They have people who have been educated for the very first time, people who learned how to read when illiteracy was eliminated from Venezuela in 2005. People who, for the first time, have teeth, quite honestly, because people didn't have dental care. The poor didn't have dental care. Now there's, a doctor in every neighborhood, especially in the barrios. There's several new universities. There's reforestation programs where they've planted over 1 million trees in the past couple of years through Mission Arrabal. They have the Women's Development Bank, which has given billions of dollars worth of microcredit and credits to women in precarious situations to start businesses and cooperatives and things like that. The cooperative sector is booming in Venezuela. The workers sector, like workers' ownership and social property. They have 100% pension coverage, and they also have the CLAPs, which is the monthly food allocation. They have that gets delivered directly to your door. Also, when it came to COVID, their model was extremely it was touted around Latin America because they had teams with help from China, especially. They had teams that would go door to door to give tests. They had teams that would go door to door to provide masks and all this different stuff. They sanitized public transportation every single night. So that's, and you see an astronomically low amount of cases in Venezuela, and that's part of the reason why. So here you have a government that is a workers' government. They call Nicolas Maduro, they call him, the worker president because he was a bus driver for a lot of his life. And that's what we like to see. And it's especially irritating when a lot of these people are saying, Chavismo is a pest and they elected a bus driver as president. God forbid, right? God forbid an everyday working person has political power as opposed to a banker or a weapons manufacturer, So this is a government that cares for its people, and it really shows every single day in the programs that it has, and it's day and night, extreme poverty. Poverty has been it goes down every single year. It continues to go down every single year. They haven't closed a single school in the face of an economic crisis, which we have no idea what that's like in the United States. No one's thrown out onto the street. There's no the eviction process that we went through in the past 12 years or so in the face of the 2008 crisis. That didn't happen in Venezuela. So even in terms of economic crisis, you still see the government and the people supporting each other. It's a give and take. Cristina Fernandez in Argentina says that loyalty is a two-way street. The people may be loyal to the leader, but the leader also has to be loyal to the people. And I think that's exemplified in Venezuela.
So another area that Latin American generals and very progressive at is LGBT rights. I mean, they've been leaders in many ways for things like gay marriage and anti-discrimination stuff. And we've heard a lot about Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay leading the way. But what's the current status in Venezuela? What is the reality for LGBT people in the country, and what is the country's government doing to accelerate their rights?
So since the economic crisis began, the U.S. imposed and international system imposed economic crisis began, a lot of those issues went to the back burner when it came to LGBT rights and abortion rights and things like that. But when it comes to on the ground, I'm gay.
Welcome.
Shock. Oh, wait, cut his mic. Cut his mic. How do we not catch this?
And I walk the streets. I was very open. A lot of my friends in Venezuela are gay. One of my best friends in Venezuela, Ingrid Beron, she's running for the National Assembly elections that'll be held next month, and she's a very open and out lesbian. Rainbow flags are very, very present at PSUV events, and the president is in favor of gay marriage. He thinks that one of the first things that should be done in the new National Assembly should be a same-sex marriage law. And again, I think it depends, even if there's no gay marriage and there's none of that stuff in Venezuela, the anti-poverty programs that have helped everyone, including gay people, have done more for gay people than gay marriage did in the United States.
Wow, doing a class reductionism on our podcast.
100%. I know it's my own take. But so, there's a lot to be said for that as well. But I mean, this is also a very Roman Catholic. It's interesting because Argentina, very Roman Catholic. I'm a Roman Catholic. I guess I'm coming out twice.
Wow. We really didn't. We need to do better vetting on guests.
I apologize. Don't worry. But so again, and it's difficult in that manner, but you see a lot of these rights being recognized. And like I said, I think the social rights and the economic rights that were acquired are more, they may not be as symbolic, but I think they do have more to do with the day-to-day functioning of people and people's lives than things like marriage. Although I will say, I do believe by the end of 2021, there will be gay marriage in Venezuela.
Awesome. And I do think from skimming before this episode, I did see, I think Venezuela had one of their first trans Congress members, which I think beats the U.S. Is that true? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a little unfortunate because they're a member of a fascist party.
Oh no!
Whoops. Well, representation matters or something.
They actually had, I believe, 2 transgender lawmakers in the National Assembly elected in 2015. And they were from very far right parties. Although this time you see another friend of mine is transgender in Venezuela, and she's running with the PSUV. So again, like, even when it comes to representation, like, yes, they did beat the United States. And as far as I know, they beat a lot of Latin America in that. I'm not quite sure about when it comes to representation in legislatures and stuff like that, but I mean, that's a big deal. But yeah, it's just unfortunate they're from a fascist party and they're extremely counter-revolutionary, and I don't fuck with that.
Yeah, well, no, but it is. I mean, a point well made to say that the kind of the symbolic victories that we have won in the U.S. over and over again are it's sort of like, congratulations, you can get gay married and then live in your car while working 3 jobs with your with your fentanyl addicted husband. Congratulations. We're so happy for you. It cost us nothing.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a concession from whom exactly? No one, actually. I mean, let's be 100% honest. Like, a lot of people probably got rich when gays could get married because God knows they like to spend money. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, taste not accounting for much. Yeah.
So another country with a long, problematic history of the U.S. is Argentina. And we heard briefly in the U.S. media about their new leader, Alberto Fernandez, who's been claimed to be a center-left government leader. What are your thoughts on him? And, like, is he actually, like, a leftist? Is he someone that's good? Or, like, is he going to, like, more suit the bourgeois interests in the country?
So what... Okay. So what... Because Argentina's politics is by far the most complicated of any country I've ever encountered. That's why I wrote my thesis on it, because I think it's just very... It doesn't make any sense, to be quite honest. So it starts with Peronism. Peronism, is an ideology that the right will call left and the left will call right. I think it's a socialist ideology. But the three pillars of Peronism, briefly, are social justice, economic independence, and sovereignty, which sounds pretty left. It's very similar to, like, Nasser or Gaddafi or Mao. Even Peron and Mao were very close. But it's also known for being pragmatic. Peron used to say, like, all the communists, like, you guys want to do exactly what Allende did, and Allende died for it. Like, we gotta, like, it doesn't matter how much you achieve in 2 years if in 3 years it's all gone.
Right. And the left critique of Peronism is that it's essentially a form of sort of soft Bonapartism, though, right? I mean, that's, like, I've certainly heard that critique made.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's the whole fascism thing. They allege that it's fascism.
Right. Well, but I mean, I feel like anybody sort of just calls everything fascist. Like, there are people who call everything fascist, right? But I mean, the nuanced critique would be that it was certainly not. It didn't look like any other sort of left wing project we would recognize, even though it might have been a novel form. Is that fair to say?
True. That's true.
Yeah.
It didn't look. I mean, it used, again, like, when you, like, those 3 pillars, like, those are very leftist ideals.
Mm-hmm.
but they were, and it's also in the context of Argentina within the Cold War. So if they want to be sovereign, that's their main thing. They don't want anything that's associated with the Soviet Union or the United States. So they say communism, no, we don't want that. We don't want capitalism either. So they say we want social justice. What the fuck's that? That's
well, I suppose if people have seen the documentary film Evita, they'll know all about what that was.
I can't believe they got Madonna to star in that.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it?
Oh God, yeah. I made Sam watch it for the first time. It was very funny. It's fine.
Even like even in the movie, like they talk about the bourgeoisie and like, and that's something they really did. They said, like, what was the quote from Evita? Capitalism and its oligarchic servants know well that there's no force in the world that can subdue a people that are aware of its rights. So they were totally anti-capitalist.
Yeah.
And that's why Perón was so interested in Mao, because Mao was like, we're different from the Soviet Union, but we're pursuing our own path. And that's why like it gets compared to Nasser and Gaddafi, because a lot of these movements start out as national liberation movements, which is kind of what Peronism was. And then they take on like, it inevitably becomes like a socialist oriented thing. And it's also, the communists in Argentina hated Perón, but they also hated Che Guevara at the time. So, like when Che Guevara died, they wrote like terrible things about Che Guevara, when it was Perón who said like, this guy is a martyr. He's amazing. He fought against colonialism and imperialism. And he said that the socialist revolution must continue no matter the flag it flies, is what Perón said.
It's okay. There's plenty of ultras in the U.S. who will tell you that Che Guevara was, racist, or personally racist, or homophobic. So, clearly that trend has not died. They've really carrying on the torch of Argentinian communism.
I don't get Argentina. Yeah, I don't get the whole country. No, I don't get ultras, because Mao, whatever. Mao would be like, he wouldn't understand. But
oh yes, no, don't worry. You don't have to get them; they'll get you.
strange group of people.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
They have my. Well, so that's the pretext. So coming out of the so Kirchnerism, which is a strand of 21st century Peronism, which includes people. It's a left-wing ideology. It was very much ingrained with Chavez, and it was part of that whole thing. And it has support from communist parties. It has support from the socialists. But they governed, so Nestor Kirchner in 2003, I believe, until 2007. And then from 2007 to 2011, his wife Cristina took over. And then she was reelected in 2011 to 2015. And then that's when the election was stolen by the center right, which took out that huge loan and everything. So essentially, there was an introspection that happened with Cristina at the top, and she decided to choose Alberto Fernandez to run as president and her as vice president, in a show of, because Alberto became a pretty big critic of Cristina in her second administration. And so this was her way of unifying, because part of it was they didn't unify in 2015 as much. So she was like, no matter what, we just need to win. So hers, it's a coalition. It's a huge coalition that includes literal Maoists and communists, and to like the progressives, like just everyone who's center left and onward. So there's a lot of people who he has to satisfy. So he's walking a tightrope. A friend of mine, Alicia, she was named as ambassador to Russia, and she resigned because she said, after the foreign minister of Argentina is part of the more conservative part of the coalition, and he voted against Venezuela at the UN, and she resigned over that, saying, like, obviously I disagree, and I think that we need to really have an introspection as to what we are, because and so it showed fractures in the coalition, essentially. There's also all this talk that Cristina is kind of unhappy with Alberto, but her hands are kind of tied, which I believe. So it's difficult. I mean, and then there's a lot of pretty good left things that were done. He did kick out Juan Guaido's representative to Argentina and said no. He did invite Jorge Rodriguez, one of the ministers, to his inauguration, which really pissed off the United States. They left early because of that.
Messy bitches.
Much. And they froze like utility hikes, and they declared the internet as a utility so that prices couldn't go up. And so they have done progressive things, and they're in meetings with the IMF, but they have such a tightrope to walk because they don't want to piss the United States off too much, because then they're really screwed with the IMF, which means that like the country is just destroyed essentially.
Right. I mean, that IMF debt is absurdly large. I mean, you mentioned before, but I just quietly looked up. I mean, Argentina's GDP is like $500 billion US dollars a year. And they're basically carrying over, 10 or 12% of their total GDP as a single IMF loan. I mean, that's insane.
And it's paradoxical because where did the money go? Like nothing got better in Argentina under Macri. Like everyone was screwed. So
I'm
where
sure
did
there's some
that
tax cuts.
go?
Like I'm sure there was an upper income tax cut. It's always where it goes.
It's either that or it literally just went into their pockets, because the Panama Papers, he was named in the Panama Papers. And that's the thing. They say Christina's corrupt, blah, blah, blah. But one, there's no evidence of any of that. Literally no evidence. And two, there is actual evidence of corruption with Mauricio Macri, his brother and his cousins, and like all of that. So it's another part of just a soft regime change kind of thing, because for a little bit they thought that Cristina was going to go to prison because in her administration she signed a pact with Iran, which really pissed off the United States and pissed off Israel. So there were calls from even like ex-Mossad agents got involved, saying that she should be in prison, like just very strange stuff. So, and yeah, that loan, I mean, it was very clearly because they didn't need to do it. The economic conditions that he took over, he inherited a country that really economic policy was extremely solid under Cristina and Nestor. It was a devastated country when they arrived in 2003, and they had some of the lowest unemployment in the history of Argentina, some of the lowest inflation. They built more schools it's the period number 2 when it comes to school construction, less only to Perón, science centers, like housing, like, all the, like just an absolute economic miracle, really. And Mark Weisbrot at the, I don't want to say his organization wrong, but he has a book called Failed: What the Global Experts Got Wrong About the Economy. And he talks a lot about Argentina because they told the IMF to get the fuck out, and they did their own thing, and they did a very left-wing consumption-based approach to economics that led to growth that was absolutely unparalleled. So there was no reason for that loan, and it was taken out, and it has destroyed the country so far. So they've arrived with scorched earth to take care of. So time will tell.
So another thing that we have heard about from the Argentinian Alberto Fernandez is his son, because he was a gay and a drag queen who's actually quite iconic. And I actually was reading there's a feud between him and Bolsonaro's son, who tries to use his
also a drag queen? Or
no,
okay.
Who uses his gayness and drag queen stuff to attack the administration. So what has that been like? Because the region is still quite religious, but the president hasn't decided to hide their son in the closet and be like, oh, it's okay, I'm not going to acknowledge that. But it's been quite open about his gay drag queen son.
Well, his son is gorgeous.
Yeah.
He's, oh my God. Anyway, but it is very interesting because it's a continent in contention. It's a continent that's kind of at war with itself because, and again, that's all because of the United States, all because of that. What's good though is that and it's when people kind of hear that I'm Roman Catholic, for example, they're very surprised. But in Latin America, Roman Catholicism means something different. And that's kind of the brand that I like. And that's why I'm a Roman Catholic. It's that whole liberation theology, like, you know, and that's the kind of thing that like a lot, like Argentina, again, one of the most Roman Catholic countries in the world, has some of the largest support for gay marriage, has some of the most advanced rights for the transgender community and things like that. So I guess it all depends kind of on what you use your religion for. I mean, it is kind of paradoxical that, you know, Christina is a Catholic and Donald Trump is whatever the hell he is. But Christina and Mike Pence are probably in the same religion family tree, but believes completely different things, you know? So yeah, it's related to that, but it is very interesting. Bolsonaro's son is the way he is. I think that's something much more to be ashamed of. Bolsonaro is such an interesting figure. I really, very interesting to see in this time.
So part of you know, our project we've been failing at for season 2 of Twink Revolution was trying to be sort of anti-black pill, because that's too easy. So kind of wanted to ask a little bit about, you know, you've talked about some of the things that you're optimistic about in the political landscape, but what other things, you know, what are you sort of hopeful for in terms of like what's on the up and up? What are you putting your efforts into, or what are you putting your hopes and dreams into? Into which basket are you stacking your eggs?
Well, you need to buy a basket first.
Yeah. Well, in this economy?
Exactly. I'm hopeful for a lot of stuff, really. I'm more hopeful than I am pessimistic just about things in general. I mean, there are, like you said, like a second pink tide is like a really big deal for a lot of people. You know, a lot of people, like that's tens of millions of people out of poverty. You know, I'm excited to... well, next week I'm supposed to see my friend Caleb, who has been on your show.
Big fans of Caleb.
Yes.
Yes. So that should be good. But hopefully maybe what the second round of stimulus, I'll actually get a check this time. That would be nice.
Very nice, yeah.
But I mean, there is a lot to be optimistic about. There's a lot of vaccines and stuff in the trials for Corona, and good ones, like ones from Russia and China and Venezuela, not like, you know, Bill Gates, like not into. So yeah, there's stuff to be happy about.
Well, that's good.
I know it seems like not, but like
no, I think theater. That's good. It's these little things we can look forward to. So what I think is important right now. Dakotah Lilly, where do people find more of you?
Well, my name is spelled Dakotah Lilly. I have a Facebook, which is probably where I'm most active now that I've been booted off of Twitter.
Twitter jail.
Yes. I'm still hoping to get it back. I haven't lost hope. Maybe I'll pay a hacker or something. Who knows? I have Instagram, which is Gringo Chavista, Twitter, which is Gringo Chavista 1. I'm going to have a YouTube channel in the next coming days where I'll have like all my like Press TV and RT and Tucker Carlson, all that stuff will be on there. So hopefully I can actually start making like original content a little bit better. Because right now, like when I do lives and like videos and stuff, it's always on Facebook. So hopefully that'll become something. Who knows?
Cool. But well, people can definitely look out for links to that when that is spun up.
We'll link it below.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Dakotah, thank you so much for joining us and taking us through the wonderful world of Latin America. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite, and hopefully I can come back at some point.